tagliata, messa fuori, c'è Pirlo, ancora Pirlo di tacco, tiro, gol!
Hello and welcome to the AC Milan Talk podcast. I'm your host Samit Paul, and I'm delighted to say that you won't have to listen to me ramble on my own this week. I'm joined by Jack Cowling, who you may remember from previous pods, and you may recognise his voice from our NBA podcast on the SP Weekly channel, which is available on iTunes. Jack, cheeky little plug there. How you doing?
Yeah, all good to play. Got to take the chat so you can. But no, pumped to be back on talking a bit about Milan. Last time we were chatting, they were about to take over global football and were destined to win Serie A and the Europa this year. And looking forward to discussing why that's maybe not the case at the moment.
Yeah, not quite going to plan, but yeah. We'll right, so yeah, unfortunately we've got another loss to dissect today. Milan lost 2-0 to Juventus at a sold-out San Siro on Saturday night. Gonzalo Higuain scored a double, sealed the win for the visitors, and ultimately, after falling short against Lazio, Roma and Inter already this season, it's a familiar story for Milan and they've failed another test. Just a quick recap in terms of the positives and negatives and my rating for Montella. I think Milan started the game really well. There was good tempo and urgency to their play, but ultimately they couldn't match Juve for the entire 90 minutes and we fell short. And yeah, just that little bit of quality up top when they needed it. Higuain produced 2 excellent finishes. I've given Montella a 5 out of 10 for my rating. That's purely based down on the fact that I just don't know it's hard for me to explain how he picked Kalinic over Andre Silva up front. That was a real sort of talking point before the game, and I think he got that one wrong, and obviously we'll come to Kalinic later, but he didn't take his chances and we were left to rue that. And the other kind of contentious point was how long he left Lucas Biglia on the pitch for. I personally felt he could have replaced him earlier on. Another sort of letdown, if you like. So I've given Montella a 5 out of 10. That's 5 defeats in 11 Serie A games so far this season. And obviously the first man in the firing line is the coach, and that falls on Montella. So 5 out of 10 from me. Jack, let's get stuck into these player ratings then. Kicking off with Gianluigi Donnarumma. I've given him a 6. I thought he was relatively untested throughout the game, and in all fairness, he couldn't really do much about either of Higuain's goals. So I've given him a 6.
Yeah, I think that's about spot on. It's always one of those difficult ones when there's two worldies. You know, there is a keeper of his quality. He sometimes does manage to somehow save those, but you know, they're not expected. The finishes were top drawer. But as you say, didn't do a lot wrong. Wasn't too tested, wasn't too called upon. But I thought 6 was probably a fair shout for him.
Good man. I've also given a 6 to Christian Zapata. There was a couple of people on Twitter prior to the game questioning why he was in the team, and I understand that in front of Masacchio, but for the second consecutive outing on a personal level, he's actually produced a decent, solid defensive performance. So did his part to keep things tight at the back, and I was pretty happy with him. So solid 6 for me. Yeah,
and without wanting to mirror you too much, I think I'd go the same. I think he was probably the defender of the game. You know, I think he was probably the best performer across the back line and such. You know, I had my last year, I think I mentioned, I sort of had doubts, but he's one of those players that you kind of think's worse than he is. I think, you know, he's not a really sort of fashionable person to like and stuff, because obviously he's not a big name signing like the others and things, and it's quite easy to be, you know, understate, you know, his qualities. But I think he had a solid game. So, but when you can see 2, you know, I think you can't go much higher than a 6 for a defensive player. So yeah, 6 out of 10 sounds right.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to get your opinion on this, because I think I may have been a little bit too harsh on him, but I've given Romagnoli a 5, and you know, on the whole, I was impressed with him. He made some really good interceptions. He was strong in the tackle in the air. So it's difficult to criticise him too much, and taking into consideration the finish from Higuain for the first goal. But I personally felt as though he kind of stood off him a little bit and gave him too much room to get his shot off. So that was a key moment in the game. The first goal was always going to be crucial. So I've given him a 5, but have I been a bit harsh kind of criticising him for the opening goal, or would you give him a 5 as well?
I think you have, yeah. I went 6 for him as well. As I said, I think Zapata was probably the best performer, but I think Romagnoli did have a really good game. You know, the goal, it's, you know, you're talking inches rather than feet, aren't you? You know what I mean? It's one of those, and the backlift was so short from Higuain, and you know, such pace that he hit it. You know, it literally maybe an inch or two either side, then it had either gone wide or Romagnoli probably would have blocked it and it gone over for a corner or so. So I think a little bit harsh getting on him for that one, but at the same time, you know, this is the highest level, and winning games like this, it's those tiny, minute details that is all the difference, isn't it?
True. Well, if you think that's harsh, I think you might find the next one harsh as well. I've given Rodriguez a 5 as well. Similarly to Romagnoli, I thought he looked comfortable on the ball, decently defensively. Then you had to switch later on in the game over to the left. But again, for me, just the moment that really mattered was when he should have been a little bit tighter to Higuain to prevent the second goal. And again, full credit to Higuain, ruthlessly exposed that space and made the most of it. So yeah, maybe a little bit harsh again, but I've given Rodriguez a 5.
Okay, yeah, I can see where the defensive critic comes. No, I went 6 again. Yeah, I went for 6 for all because, even though it was 2-0, I do think it was a fairly assured performance, other than the 2 goals. There wasn't bundles of opportunities coming their way. Dybala was restricted to some long-range efforts and things like that. I actually thought they did their part, really. I actually thought the defence, and occasionally you just come up against a striker who's obviously banging form and can score a couple of worldies. So, with him, maybe a little bit more open to criticism than Romagnoli, but I think 6 out of 10 for the whole back three is probably fair.
Good man. I've gone slightly higher for Abate. I've given him a 6. He's obviously been out for a while, came back, couldn't finish the game, picked up a new fresh injury problem. But while he was on the pitch, I think he did a fairly decent job looking after Mandzukic, and as he always does, he offered energy, commitment down the right flank. So again, nothing extravagant, nothing special, but I think Abate can get a solid 6 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah, as you said, sort of whilst he was on the pitch, the energy levels were good, and sort of he sticks to his duties really without sort of being too flash or it wasn't too exciting things. He did what he had to do well. So I think a 6 is fair.
Kessie gets a 5. I think for me, he's still falling short of showing that kind of consistency that he displayed earlier in the season. There were moments where he was really sloppy in possession, lacked the composure when it mattered going forwards. But you know what you get with Kessie as well. His tirelessly defensive work was very key in the game, but just as I mentioned, I just don't feel as though, by his standards, I don't think he's performing as well as he could be. So I know you were very excited about this signing in the summer when we were talking about it at the time, but just a little bit disappointed in Kessie on this occasion, so I've given him a 5.
I went 6 again for Kessie. I did think, as you said, I was hugely pumped for the signing. I think, and still am, he's still young. That's the thing. It's sort of when you come in after the seasons he's had and he started off in impressive fashion and things, it's, very easy to kind of forget age and start sort of looking to well. But even though I was looking for more of an influence in terms of going forward and such in the game, I do think he is integral in that centre mid, as you said, is sort of his work rate and sort of the shielding and the pass blocking that he's sort of doing is actually very impressive still. So I still thought he had a fairly good game, but it's these big games where you want to see him put his foot in there and dominate a little bit more. But I think a 6 out of 10 was probably fair.
You're making me sound like I'm being really harsh now. I'm starting to question some of these ratings. Jack Biglia, what have you given him?
Well, I didn't know how low you were allowed to go, really. One of those. It was sort of... no, I think, he obviously wasn't offering much on the defensive end. He's not contributing going forward. So when people are like that, you're kind of going, what are you doing? If you're not contributing to either end, it's really difficult. It sounded like, to me, the fans were starting to turn on him a little bit. He might be, the sort of visible scapegoat at the moment, in terms which always then you start picking up on every small mistake that happens and things and start, kind of head in hands even more so than if it was a player that was doing all right and such. But I went for 3 out of 10, just as I said. He was on the pitch, I suppose, so you can't kind of go too much lower than that and things. But just nothing at all really was there on either end of the pitch that gives you any sort of optimism, hope or sort of enjoyment as a fan to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo all those points. I've actually given him a 4, but I'd quite easily have gone down to a 3 if I thought we were going that low. But you're right. He was jeered by the fans as the game went on. I've mentioned it before in previous podcasts that I just don't feel as if he's got enough personality about his game to really dominate a full 90 minutes. Like you mentioned there, I just feel like he floats around, he does things, he does the tidy bits and pieces on the ball and off the ball, doesn't really offer that defensive coverage in midfield that we need. And like you said, he is mobile, but I don't feel as though he gets about the pitch enough and stamps his mark on the game enough. So for me, I would have liked to see a change moving forward, maybe Locatelli coming in for him, but I'm not impressed with him on this occasion. So yeah, I've given him a 4. I've given Barini a 6. Again, similar sort of story with him. You can't fault him for effort, for energy, works tirelessly for the team, switches around the pitch, shows his versatility as well. And for a change, I've obviously criticised him in recent weeks about not having that sort of quality in the final third to really stand out. but on this occasion he had two really, really good crosses which Kalinic couldn't make the most of. So can't really fault Barini yet again. And I'm shocked to say this considering all the summer signings we made, but he is emerging as like the most consistent performer out of the new boys. So really impressed with him. But obviously with the result and stuff, so I think I'm going to settle for a 6 out of 10 for him.
Yeah, I went for 6 as well. From the years of watching Barini, certainly in the Premier League and such, sort of my take on him, as you said, he can occasionally have these games where he's great, but quite often he fades. But he's one of those players that he'll always create something, or at least when he does, if it's not taken, then all of a sudden, if, as you said, if his couple of deliveries that were amazing were taken, all of a sudden you talk about maybe an 8 or even maybe a 9 out of 10 and such. And it's a bit unfair to do a player for the lackings of another player. But my thing with him is, as I said, when he's high in confidence and he starts to do some things well, it seems as though he really sort of thrives and such. My problems with Barini is when it's not going quite so well and things, is he a go-to man who's going to kind of get you out of a tough spot sort of thing. But I thought in this game, he looked impressive, as I said. He looked as though the quality was actually maybe a bit better than I've seen of the last couple of years. Certainly one or two of those balls and sort of finding the space to get those crosses was good. So, but unfortunately they weren't taken. So as I said, instead of 8s or 9s, I think 6 is probably about bang on.
Yep, sounds fair enough. I've given Sousa a 6 as well. Probably a little bit generous. I don't know. I'll get your take in a second, but. As always, he's always the most likely sort of source of Milan's best creative work. We're always looking to him to make something happen, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But he is the one that kind of makes things happen. He showed glimpses of what he could do. But being the main man, obviously Juve paid him more attention than anyone else, closed down the space to ensure that he didn't really, couldn't have a decisive impact on the game. So tried his best, but for me, quality wasn't there, as we've seen from him. So I've settled for a 6 out of 10.
I went 1 under. I thought if I thought I was giving Barini a 6, I don't think so. Just because he didn't create those clear-cut chances quite as Barini did, so I went 5 out of 10. So as you said, we know he's got the quality. He's got the ability to pick passes and create havoc for defenses and stuff. But again, I just didn't think he quite did enough to kind of really do that to deliver against Juve. And unfortunately, I just think he's just a mark below Barini at 5 out of 10.
No, that's fair enough shout. Calhanoglu gets a 5 from me. I think I was impressed with him in the early stages. I think he was building on his Chievo performance after he grabbed the goal. Thought he was looking a bit more confident. But as the game went on, I think he kind of disappeared as Juve started to take over, struggled to get involved. And it was just another one of those where you'd expect more from him, but it was just a difficult situation for him to do much. So disappointed, but in the circumstances, can't be too harsh. But again, I think I've given him a 5, and I don't know if that's a fair enough one, but what have you given him? Yeah,
I went 5 as well. Sort of similar reason. And you said sort of started lively and such. You've always got to take into consideration that you're playing Juve, who are a very strong defensive team, and it is difficult for attackers and such. But again, just watching the game, my fear was looking at the three sort of attackers in particular, the three that we're just talking about, is are they good enough? Are they good enough to kind of take on these elite teams? And are they consistent enough that, right, at least 2 of them are going to perform, for 90 minutes? Or even is one of them going to perform for a full 90 minutes? And at the moment, I felt that they all sort of fluttered in and out the game, but at sort of different times and such. So the attack was never sort of on full gung-ho mode. But, he showed glimpses where I thought, okay, this, he looks a real player. But it was only glimpses and sort of nothing stable. So at 5 for me.
Good chat. And I'm going to give you the honours of rounding off the starting lineup with Kalinic. What have you given him?
I've given him a mark for both of his clear-cut misses, so 2 out of 10. It was just struggling badly, wasn't he? Sort of, the linking up didn't seem particularly of any sort of quality. That was disappointing. But for me, a striker is scored and ranked on their ability to put the ball in the net. And, he had a couple of chances which against a big team is likely all you're going to get, and he completely fluffed his lines, didn't he? So, again, if they go in the back of the net, you could be talking of a much higher mark and stuff, but they didn't, and he has to be sort of scrutinised against that. So, joking aside, 2 out of 10.
That's fair enough. I've given him a 4. I completely see why he would get lower. You're completely right. I think, part of the reason that I was kind of happy with the signing was that I felt like he would offer what Montella needed in this team in terms of the build-up play. Didn't see any of that. I've defended him, countless occasions on Twitter. Fans not happy with the signing, and he's just not performing and kind of living up to what I thought he would do. And like I said, ultimately, he had 2 great chances. The one that he hit the bar with was painful, to say the least, watching that. Really disappointing from Kalinic. And before the game, I did want Silva to start, so fingers crossed that that change gets made sooner rather than later. But yeah, 4 for Kalinic, not impressed. Moving on to the subs, we're going to skip Silva because I don't feel he had enough time to really sort of make an impact and give him a fair rating. But I've given Locatelli and Antonelli 5 apiece. Locatelli, I think he showed a bit more grit. He wasn't afraid to get stuck into tackles, and there were just glimpses of the creative qualities that he has. But I think he came on at a time where Juve were kind of hitting their stride, getting a bit more classy with their passing. So can't really be too harsh on him. So I'm giving him a 5. And similar story for Antonelli, just more energy, bit of width on the left, but limited in terms of an impact. So 5 apiece for them. Any different for you?
No, I would mirror exactly what you said there. Sort of decent performances, without really influencing the game and such, but certainly didn't sort of, go missing. That you could tell that they'd come on board, and there was a couple of positives in there each, but no real impact. So I think you go in the middle, don't you? 5 out of 10 sounds right.
Good man. Right, talking points. The first one, of course, has to start with Montella. Everybody keeps asking the question, how long has he got to kind of turn things around? Will Milan sack him? Will they wait till the end of the season until Conte's available, or would they move now with a sort of temporary sort of solution? 8th in the table. We're most likely, looking at the results, Lazio have already won. Napoli are winning. We could be 12 points adrift of the top 4 by the end of today. How long does he get, Jack? Because I've always defended him. I've always said give him more time. It's getting increasingly more and more difficult week by week to kind of defend him and say, yep, he still needs time. So do you think we're on the cusp of seeing a change, or do you still think he'll get a bit of leeway to swing things around and get us on track?
It's a tough one, isn't it? When is the right choice? And part of you is sort of, well, it seems a bit of an obscure time of the year to sort of do it now and such. But if there's no signs of improvement or no signs of development, it is a case of the sooner the better. I think I mentioned on the last pod I was on at the tail end when we were reviewing last season that I thought he was under trouble. I thought there was no conviction in sort of his team selection or his formations or his style of play. And I was worried that bringing in so many new faces was only going to further complicate that. And, I'm not actually happy to say that seems to be what's happened, really. It's sort of still, anytime a whole fan base is scratching heads, hours before kickoff because of team selection and things like that, it just sort of, I don't know, it gives you on rumbling, it gives you on nerves. If he was just putting out players who were underperforming, it's a lot easier to do that when you think on paper he's putting out the best players or sort of the informed players and things. So, but when he's sticking to his guns and choosing players that he believes are the ones to deliver, and unfortunately for him they're not, it's really hard to sort of kind of for him to have any much justification in what he's doing. So I always sort of say whenever at the start of the season, I think if you start with a manager, they should get till Christmas, get to sort of the new year at least, because that's sort of moving into sort of halfway through the season, and it does still take time. We are only a quarter of the way through so far, so I still think as though in theory, you should go that long, but 3 big games out of 3 and have gone astray, and there's only going to be bigger games coming up as every point becomes more and more critical, and obviously the other tournaments as well. So I wouldn't be surprised, and obviously Ancelotti has been chopped recently. I know there's talk of Conte at Chelsea, maybe if you wanted to wait out and things like that, but how often is there maybe a couple of managers of the ilk that are out there at the moment available, and it could be the right choice to maybe go and try and snap one of those up before too long.
Absolutely. I think that is my main reservation. I think if we can go out and get Ancelotti and convince him to come back, then great, let's do it. We've got an international break coming up next month, why not? But the names that have kind of been banded around in the last couple of days, Walter Mazzarri, Paulo Sousa, ex-Fiorentina boss, don't fill me with an incredible amount of confidence that they could do any better than Montella, to be quite honest. So yeah. I think it's a question of either you go big, you go for Carlo. If he doesn't come, then again, yes, a change will lift the players, lift the club if Montella still can't deliver. But, I think next summer, bring in Antonio. If he wants to come back to Italy, then that would be my ideal sort of scenario. But yeah, Mazzarri or Sosa don't do it for me. But we'll have to wait and see. And then the kind of other talking point that was raised was, as I mentioned, 12 points adrift now of the top 4 qualification spots for the Champions League. When are we looking at the Europa League and thinking that's our best route to Europe's top table? Because I don't know, don't ask me to crunch the numbers, but obviously as we fall further and further adrift, it's going to get more and more difficult to say we can grab that 4th spot. So do we look at the Europa League now and start thinking, okay, we'll go along in the league, try and do our best, but ultimately that is going to be the best opportunity we can get to get back to the Champions League now?
Yeah, definitely. I think anybody that's in the Europa, as you said, because it's the fewest games that it takes to kind of get there, isn't there, and kind of do it. But I just think it's a huge ask. You're expecting them to win 3 or 4 of the biggest games that you're going to play this season, and sort of quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals and stuff. And so far, the team and the players have come up well short when it's mattered in big, high-pressure games and things. So I just think it's a huge risk to sort of bet or, hedge all your bets on that and sort of sacrifice the league because never mind Champions League, you need Europe regardless next year. So you need to make sure that there's the consistency in the league. As we said, we're only a quarter of the way through so far, but you need to find that stability in team selection, team style, team play and all the rest. And that will be your best way of delivering the best year you can. What will happen in a cup happens in a cup. Each game becomes a cup final, and even if you think you're playing lesser competition, lesser sort of quality teams, you can still be overdone in the league if you can really build some form and build some momentum. It can get you going up that table to as high as possible. So I don't know, Champions League, unfortunately, the start of the season, as you said, sort of 5 wins out of the 11, 5 defeats out of the 11 isn't the way you need to start a season, and it does scupper expectations when you come into the year. So I think it's a big ask, in honesty, to Champions League next year.
Yeah, it's looking that way. Yeah, I think people may have interpreted what I was saying. So I did mention that on Twitter after the game last night, and that wasn't me saying let's just all go all in for the Europa League because we can just walk it and win it. I just feel like, as the more we fall further behind the competition in Serie A, is that now going to become more of a priority for us? So we will wait and see. But certainly going to be difficult either way. Twitter comments and questions. Thanks for all the comments, guys. Plenty come in last night. Starting with Fabio Lucarini at Fatty_fadeaway on Twitter. Europa League, don't make me laugh. This side will get crushed by anyone good. He's got a point. Yeah. And then Nick Roberts at In the Nick of Time. EL will be easier when Belotti arrives in January. Lol, 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 lol. I think he was trolling me there. I'm not sure who he supports, but can't be a Milan fan. Moz at Mr. GL said, I know there is not a better option out there, but Montella is clearly not capable of getting the best from the current squad, save for Barini. I'm annoyed at the result, but not surprised. Unfortunately, the players, Biglia and a few others he's mentioned there, did Montella no favours with their performances this year. At this point, our only hope is Conte in the summer, and hope we only sell a few players and start from scratch. It is looking that way, and again, as he makes a very valid point there, that it's not all down to Montella. There's players that haven't stepped up and delivered. A number of the new boys as well. They've not kind of met expectations, and that is a worry. I know you mentioned it there. What happens next summer if we don't make the Champions League? Faserne's already said that will most probably result in player sales. A couple of top players going to kind of bridge that gap financially. So it's a worrying time. I don't like the use of the phrase starting from scratch because we did that this summer, and to see that happen again in 12 months would be bitterly disappointing.
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of, you need to lay the foundations, and as again what we sort of spoke about at the end of last year, I did feel as though even with the quality that was seemingly coming in, you have to be careful when you bring just so many people in, because it's just so difficult to get everybody settled and build those foundation blocks. It happened at Tottenham in the Premier League, Liverpool, same, and you've seen it across Europe as well when people go out and sign more than 5-6 players that they feel can be impact. It's really difficult to get that settled. So you don't want that to be the case, and what you just really need to start to do is see some glimpses of this. It can't be a 1-year project. That isn't what's going to overhaul the current top teams in Serie A and in Europe. This needs to be a 3, 4, 5 year plan, and but you need to be taking the steps in the right direction to kind of get there. So as you said, worrying signs ahead, but I don't know. It's one of those, you got to have faith that the quality of players is going to shine through at the end of the day.
Good stuff. Nick Cosatino at NPC76. When Silva and Catrone don't start, you can't expect much pop. Agreed. Daniel at Dan Rossoneri. The back three experiment has failed disastrously. Montella has to go. Bonucci, Biglia and Kalinic, the core, as Montella said, have been terrible. First to go Montella, and they can follow shortly after him. it's difficult to disagree, to be honest. Bonucci's been terrible. Biglia, as we mentioned, Kalinic, we've slated both of them in this podcast, expecting a lot more. And yeah, some of it falls on Montella, but the big three in the core of that team, the backbone of that team, haven't delivered. So certainly got questions to be answered there. Rishab Dabari, at Rishab Dabari on Twitter. Do you still think Kalinic was a good signing? No. I'm kind of tempted to say give him more time, but again, similarly to Montella, how much time is needed? I know you hate Baka, but he would have taken one of those 4 chances, agreed on that, and agreed on the fact that, I slated Baka on numerous occasions last season for not doing more in the build-up play, and Kalinic is not living up to that end of the bargain either. So all in all, not a particularly great signing so far, which is good. Also, why doesn't Silva get the nod over Kalinic? Also, before anyone berates him, Zapata was immense today, made no mistakes. The difference on the night was quality finishing. Higuain is world class, no doubt about it. 2 clinical finishes. I can't answer the question why Silva doesn't get the nod over Kalinic. As I mentioned, I fully expected him to play this game, big game. He'll probably come in for the Europa League game, which I don't agree with. I think he should be the main starter and getting a consistent run of games. So we'll have to wait and see if that happens or not. And yeah, agreed, Zapata gets plenty of stick, has got his critics, but again, was really good against Juve, so happy with his performance. Uncle J at Chikazi_J. Montella shouldn't still be on the bench. This team is lacking bite, drive and heart. Absolutely clueless manager. Hashtag Montella out. There's a reoccurring theme. It usually happens. Again, Bori Oludemi at Bori Canes on Twitter. Something has to change. We should start with Montella. His coaching team needs to leave. This is something we forgot to do last summer. We need a coach that will instill fire into the players in every game, not just a handful of games. Montella isn't the man for the job. It's difficult to really argue against this because, as you mentioned earlier in the recap, we play good football for a good 20-odd minutes, but then to not be able to kind of sustain that level, I don't know. Does that fall on the manager? Does that fall on the players? Who sort of steps up and does it? A bit of both? I don't know. Who would you kind of place the blame on, if you like, in that sort of situation?
Well, it's difficult because, if it's a one-off game, I actually tend to go towards the players because, a one-off performance is very different. But when it's a consistent and you're seeing it happen in more than one game and it's happening, fairly frequently, I think it's got to go down to the manager and coach because, it's on them to drop those players that are disappointing them, change their tactics if they're not working, fire people up and motivate them to make sure that everybody is at least given their role and such. So as soon as it becomes consistent, I think the manager and coach are then held accountable.
Yep, that's a fair point. At VA Jack Sparrow, hey Samit, remember my thoughts on Kalinic? Remember yours and Jace's response? Yes, I do. He's a very avid supporter of not signing Kalinic. And I actually gave you a shout out in the last pod, by the way. Someone mentioned Kalinic, and I did say that you've been absolutely convinced from day one that he was a terrible signing. And in fairness, you have been proved right thus far. I'm hoping Kalinic does something to change it, but ultimately at the moment it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So I definitely do remember your thoughts, and fair play to you on that one. Samir Mohammed at Samir Mohammed 72. Really appreciate your thoughts on the game. The biggest problem with Milan is not the coach, but the lack of pacey players. We can never start a counter-attack because most of our players are slow. We need Deulofeu from Barcelona. I think the 3-4-2-1 is good. We can pressure our opponents and create chances. His man of the match was Barini because he's a beast, and his flop of the match was Kalinic because we lost the match of him with those missed 2 crucial chances. Very difficult to disagree with anything you've mentioned there, Samir. And Jack, that is a real point that I've made and Samir's made in previous pods, that there's no pace in this team. If you look at it, we've got really nice technical players, Calhanoglu, Suso, all very good on the ball, all very technically gifted. But when you're looking for pace, there's absolutely nothing there. And you surely can't, especially with Milan trying to stretch back lines and get in behind. If there's no pace in the team, we're going to struggle against anyone, surely.
I think you are. Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't agree Deulofeu is the answer. I think as we saw last year, he's nice on the eye occasionally, but his actual, production isn't actually of the quality that you need at the moment. But definitely, you need pace and such. You need something different occasionally. And occasionally football is its easiest when you're just turning the defenders, making them go the wrong way. And that's when they're the most uncomfortable. I did think the formation again, in my mind, I thought the wing-backs would maybe bring that. I thought about Ian Rodriguez out wide. They're both very capable deliveries of the ball. And as we've seen people that followed their careers very talented attackers. I thought they would be your touchline huggers who would be giving you the width, giving you the pace behind, and then you've got all your nice, as you said, technical players in-house, sort of just sliding balls through, and for those to glide on and start whipping balls in, but just not the way or style that seems to be approached or sort of developed at the moment. And definitely just need, you can't just keep changing, you can't be solving problem B with answer B, it's sort of, every player is the same and things, it's sort of, there's nothing to change and things. It's really difficult to come up with a solution when, your answer to a question is the same as the answer that's failed before, isn't it? So definitely needs some pace, but again, it's something you might be able to address in the next window. But at the moment, it's not there. So need to find different answers to kind of try and get results coming.
Exactly. A couple of months to go, see if anything happens in January. But problems exist now. We'll have to find those solutions. Good stuff. Right, so as I mentioned, thank you for all your questions and comments on Twitter. For those looking for us, you can find us at AC Milan Talk 1. But Jack, I think that's a wrap for this week, unless you had anything else you'd like to add.
No, nothing else to add. Just try and stay positive, Milan fans. I've been here as a Tottenham fan as well when we had a big summer, and it was, you come in more excited than ever, and inevitably face some heartache along the way. It's a long road you're on, so don't panic too much. But hopefully next time I'm on, it's in a more positive fashion.
Good man. There's a positive end to the miserable podcast for me. Cheers, mate. Good stuff. I feel like I'm cheating on him, but I'm going to use it. And I'm going to say, with a little shout out to Jace, but nothing left but say goodbye to the people, Jack.
Goodbye to the people.